Now we're going to build the Schumacher Mi4 LP shock absorber. So here's all the shock parts broken down. First stage, we're going to put the shock piston on the shock shaft. Now I've already placed one of the circlips on the shaft. This is in the bottom slot, ready for the piston. Now with the second circlip, I'm just going to give it a little tweak just to get a perfect shock for touring car. So I'm going to take some pliers, just hold the circlip halfway and just give it a little tweak and a bend. Very little, just a curve to the circlip. It's just going to hold the piston a little bit tighter. So now I'm going to put the piston in place, and I'm going to take the pre-bent circlip, and with the curve downwards, so the pointed up where we've just bent, I'm going to just put that in the top slot and use the core shock tool just to snap that in place. And with the small curve on the circlip that we gave it, it's just going to stop any free play in the piston, so that should be quite tight on there now. Should just rotate but not have any up and down play. So we're going to build the shock O-ring seal pack. I've got the body here, just going to put a few drops of shock oil in the top just to lubricate everything. Then the O-ring, which seals the shaft when it's sliding up and down. Then another drop of oil just on top of the O-ring. And then this is the spacer which just holds the O-ring in place. Then this is the shaft guide, just goes on top, and then the cap which just holds everything together. Just screw that up, just nip that up tight. With the seal cartridge complete, I'm going to add some oil, just a few drops, to the empty body, just again to make sure the O-ring is fully lubricated before the shaft goes in, and then place the shaft through and out. We're going to fit the spring preload collar to the shock now. This adjusts your ride height. We're going to take the O-ring and just place it inside the collar. The O-ring's important because it stops the collar adjusting itself during the race. So that's in place. And then what I like to do is, with a little bit of black grease, white grease, doesn't really matter, just any sort of grease, just dab a little bit on the bottoms of the thread just there. It just helps to stop cutting the O-ring as it screws itself up. Now the collar's going to go on. Just be careful, be mindful of not crossing the threads because they're very fine, which is what you need for fine adjustment. And just screw that up. Doesn't really matter where you put it at the moment, we'll adjust that later when we do the ride height. Just sort of go within 5 or 6 mil of the top and leave it there. This is fitting the ball joint and setting the length of the shock. We've got the core shock pliers here. You can see they've just got holes all the way down, no actual jaws, so they're not going to scratch the shock shaft. This is important because you've got your titanium coated shock shaft there. So we're going to slide this into the appropriate hole, the bottom one, grip it in place, and then screw the ball on. Now initial settings, we're going to do this basically to the bottom of the thread. So we're going to do it up basically so there's no thread showing. And then we're going to check it with a vernier gauge. Now the way I measure my shocks is I'll measure this gap here in between. Then you don't have to worry about the cap or anything other. You can just know what your lengths are there. So with the vernier gauge, I'm just going to measure this gap in the middle. And you see that's 12.79. I normally run mine about 12.5, 12.6. So I'm going to do that up a touch more until I get it to 12.5 or 12.6. So we're going to fill the shock with the oil now. I'm going to use the Schumacher 35 weight oil. It's a good starting point for the standard 3-hole piston that comes in the kit. So I'm going to hold the shock body and shock about 45-degree angle. Just pour the oil in from above. Holding it at the 45-degree angle just helps to stop getting air in there. It's a bit like pouring a fizzy drink into a glass. You just want to stop just shy of the top or level with the top. Don't want to bulge it over too much because then you're going to lose a lot of oil when you place the diaphragm later. And we're going to move the piston up and down slowly just to release any air that's under the piston. You'll probably get a few little bubbles release themselves, so you might want to stand this upright in a little shock holder for 10 minutes or so. Move it again up and down a couple of times and come back to it after a few attempts. But when all the bubbles are gone, we're then going to fit the diaphragm. Now I'm going to show you two different ways of building the shock. The first one is going to be with full rebound or 100% rebound. So if you see on a setup sheet full rebound or 100% rebound, this is how the shock's built basically. So we're going to leave the piston all the way to the bottom of the body, so the shaft's all the way out. We're going to hold it there, and we're then going to take the diaphragm, place it on top. You're going to get a little bit of oil going everywhere now. Just with a driver, just going to seat that down into place, just gently. You're just going to sort of rotate it into place, just so that there's no air, all the oil's come out, so there's no air left in there. And then we're going to place the cap gently over the top, being very careful not to dislocate or move the diaphragm. And just going to hold, again holding the piston all the way to the bottom, do that up snugly. And then we should have a shock with full rebound. It's important the piston can go all the way in, the shaft can go all the way in with no restriction, but it will come out all the way by itself. This is what's known as 100% rebound. So we're back a stage now to show you a different amount of rebound in the shock. So we've got the shock full of oil, ready for the diaphragm. What I like to do is use these quick clips which Schumacher sell. They're used in the car for the wheelbase adjustment, but they're handy just for doing the settings on the shock, just so you know you get all four the same. So with the quick clip in place, this is a 2mm clip. I'm just going to slide the shock all the way down so that it's stopped by the clip. Now you'll have all four the same when you do the other three. So now I'm going to put the diaphragm in place like before. Just place that on the top. And again, very gently push it down. It's really just floating it into place. No real tension here, just float it into place just so the oil spills out and it's in the right place. And then place the lid. Again, very gently, try not to dislodge the diaphragm. And then holding the piston in against the clip, just do the top up snugly. Now, we should have, when we take the clip back out, 2 or 3mm of movement. So I would say this would be 20% rebound, or someone might call it 3mm rebound. When you check a setup sheet and you see 3mm or 20%, this is the sort of distance they're talking about. That distance really is the distance that the shaft comes back out. So as we said before, 100% it comes all the way, 50% would be halfway, 0 would be not coming out at all. So as we say, this is about 2 or 3mm rebound. So you're probably wondering, what difference is rebound going to make? Why build it with 100% or why build it with 50%? Well, my general rule of thumb is the higher the traction on the track, the least amount of rebound you need. So on a high grip carpet track or even tarmac track, you'd run very little rebound, maybe 0, and on a low traction track 100%. So when you've completed the shocks with the required amount of rebound, you just want to check that they're even. So I've got 2 shocks here that I've put together, and you can see if you move them in and out, you can see that the rebound, the pressure there, is even. It's quite a fiddly thing to do this, but it's worth doing just to make sure all the shocks are even. When you're happy with the shocks and you've achieved the required rebound and they're all even, you just need to add the spring and retainer. So the spring just slides on and the retainer into place. That's the finished shock. It's worth taking your time with the shocks because they really are a very important part of a well-handling touring car. Shock oil, pistons and springs have a big effect on a touring car. We generally run the 3-hole piston that comes in the kit, but there is a 2-hole option. The 2-hole piston will increase the pack and make the car change direction faster, but the 3-hole piston is a better all-rounder. With the oil, 35 is a good starting point with the 3-hole piston. We may increase this on a hot day. All oils, no matter what manufacturer, will thin out due to the temperature. So on a hot summer's day, you may need to go up on the oil. Also on a bumpy track, you may need to go down on the oil.